Use code SPIKEFEEDERS for 5% off at face-to-facegames.com. You can shop face-to-face games in US dollars, Canadian dollars, or even euros, and they'll ship just about everywhere. That's code SPIKEFEEDERS at checkout at face-to-facegames.com to help support the show.
And we're back. Game 7 MLC action. Today, Spleenface is playing Araumi of the Dead Tide. This is a Dimir Spellseeker deck, but you're also going to see lines involving Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation. Next up, Papiphobia from the Sad Naz podcast playing Tana, Tymna, 4-color Hulk. This deck plays multi-Hulk lines. That means that once you get the Hulk into play and sacrifice it, it's likely that it's going to come back more than once. Eventually though, we're probably working towards a Kiki-Jiki combo finish. Third in turn order, our hero Jim is playing Urza. This is a Polykraken deck. We're looking to get Hullbreaker Horror in play and bounce a couple 0-drop artifacts around to make infinite mana. And last but definitely not least, Sekera is playing Jhoira, Weatherlight Captain. This is an Izzet Storm deck that uses low-cost artifacts to draw through the deck. Look for cost reducers and refunders, as well as draw engines like the Reality Chip to help sustain this storm. And with that, let's get right into it. There's no action on turn 0, so on turn 1, Spleenface draws a card. He plays a Bloodstained Mire, cracking it going to 39, and grabs an Underground Sea. He follows it up with a Jeweled Lotus, then immediately cracks it and casts Araumi. He passes it to Papiphobia. Papiphobia draws a card, plays a Marsh Flats, then cracks it going to 39, grabbing a Scrubland. He uses the Scrubland to cast a Sol Ring, then follows it up with a Chrome Mox, exiling Elvish Spirit Guide. He taps it for green and casts an Ignoble Hierarch. Another strong start, and he passes to Jim. Jim draws a card, plays an island, then casts a Sol Ring, and follows it up with a Mishra's Bauble. He passes to Sekera. Sekera draws a card, plays a Steam Vents on tap, taking 2, then casts a Lotus Petal. He finishes off his turn by casting a Soul Guide Lantern, then passes. Spleenface starts off turn 2 by untapping and drawing a card. He plays a Scalding Tarn. He casts a Mystic Remora and passes the turn. Papiphobia untaps, draws a card, then casts an Elvish Mystic. He follows it up by casting Tymna from his command zone, then passes. Jim untaps, draws a card, and plays an island as his land for turn. He taps 4 to cast Urza. That resolves, so when it enters the battlefield, it makes a construct token. Jim passes the turn. Sekera untaps, plays a Fiery Islet as his land for turn, then casts a Felwar Stone, not paying for Mystic Remora. Spleenface draws, and Sekera passes the turn. Spleenface kicks off turn 3 by untapping, and in his upkeep, Mystic Remora triggers. He pays the 1 to keep it around. In his draw step, he draws a card, then moves to his main phase and plays a Watery Grave as his land for turn. He casts a Wishclaw Talisman, and when that resolves, he passes. Papiphobia untaps, draws a card, and plays a Plateau. He moves to combat and attacks Sekera with Tymna. Exalted triggers, there's no blocks, and he gains 3 off the lifelink. In his post-combat main, he pays 1 life, draws a card, then casts Tana from the command zone. When that resolves, he passes. Jim untaps, draws a card, and kicks off his main phase with a Static Orb, not paying for the Mystic Remora. Spleenface draws a card. Spleenface casts Fierce Guardianship, targeting the Static Orb. Jim responds by casting Swansong, targeting the Fierce Guardianship, not paying for Mystic Remora again. Spleenface draws 1 more card. Swansong resolves, countering the Fierce Guardianship and giving Spleenface a bird. The Static Orb then resolves. Jim passes to Sekera. Sekera untaps, draws a card, and plays a Spirebluff Canal. He casts Jhoira, Weatherlight Captain. When that resolves, he casts a Mox Amber, triggering Jhoira and Mystic Remora. He doesn't pay for Mystic Remora, and Spleenface draws a card. The Jhoira trigger resolves, and Sekera draws a card. He passes the turn. On turn 4, Spleenface untaps the 2 lands he's allowed to, and then in his upkeep, Mystic Remora triggers and he uses those 2 lands to pay for it. He draws a card, then in his main phase, he plays an island. He casts Mox Diamond, pitching a swamp. He then moves to combat and attacks Jim with a bird. Jim doesn't block and he goes to 38. Spleenface moves to his end step and Papiphobia casts Abrupt Decay, targeting Jim's Static Orb. Jim responds by casting Resculpt, targeting the Static Orb, not paying for Mystic Remora again. Resculpt resolves and Jim makes a 4/4 Elemental. The Abrupt Decay fails to resolve because it doesn't have a valid target anymore. Then Spleenface finishes passing the turn. Papiphobia untaps, draws, and plays Phyrexian Tower. He moves to combat, swinging Tymna and Tana both at Spleenface. Spleenface blocks Tana, and Papaphobia gains 2 life off the lifelink. In his post-combat main, Papaphobia pays 1 life and draws a card off of Tymna's triggered ability, then he passes the turn. Not a whole lot going on Jim's turn. He untaps, draws a card, and passes. Cicada untaps, draws a card, and casts an Urza of his own. This triggers Jhoira. He draws a card, then it resolves and it enters the battlefield making a construct. He casts the Reality Chip. This triggers Jhoira again. He moves to his end step and Spleenface casts Brainstorm. It resolves. After drawing 3 cards and putting 2 back, Spleenface then casts Vampiric Tutor. He searches up 1 card, puts it on top of his library, loses 2 life, then with the stack empty, Cicada continues to pass the turn. Kicking off turn 5, Spleenface untaps, and in his upkeep, Mystic Remora triggers. This time he doesn't pay for the cumulative upkeep, and Mystic Remora goes away. He draws a card, plays Cephalid Colosseum, then casts Lotus Petal. Wasting no time, he casts Thassa's Oracle. It resolves, and he holds priority on the ETB trigger to activate Wishclaw Talisman, giving it to Papaphobia. He searches up his library for 1 card, and surprise surprise, casts Demonic Consultation. With Consultation still on the stack, Jim responds by activating Urza, praying for a counterspell. Jim flips City of Traitors, then the Demonic Consultation resolves, naming Dockside Extortionist. Spleenface exiles his entire library, then the Thassa's Oracle trigger resolves, and Spleenface wins the game. Just a quick one this week, raw runtime was only 32 minutes on this and the game didn't start until 7 minutes in. I was kinda hoping that this static orb would stay around for a little bit longer, but that is absolutely devastating to play through and I totally understand why Papaphobia wanted it gone. This brings my record through 7 games to 2-5-0. With 3 games left in the regular season for the MLC, can I get 1 more? Who knows, we'll have to find out next time. Huge thanks to all of our patrons. We love trying new things like this, and your support really makes it possible. Hey, thank you for checking out the Spike Feeders on YouTube. If you're not subscribed yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button before you close the window, or you can click on this link to check out our other great videos.